our underreported story segment tonight, free speech at risk in Europe. Even after suffering attack after attack after attack at the hands of radical Islamists, European leaders still have their heads in the sand. At a meeting of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, participants said, and I quote here, they firmly reject identification of terrorism with any nationality or religion. Basically, it's willful blindness. And one has to wonder how much longer will Western civilization survive if its leaders refuse to identify the enemy as radical Islam. With me now from the Center for Security Policy, President of Issue Management Incorporated, Christopher Hall. Chris, good to see you.
Good to see you, Liz. Thanks for having me on.
All right, this is quite something. So this organization, this conference, I should say, it's called the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. You would think the primary topic of conversation would be the myriad of terror attacks that Europe has been experiencing over the past 5 to 10 years, yet they put out a statement saying that they firmly reject any identification of terrorism with any nationality or religion. That, Chris, is mind-boggling to me.
Well, it should boggle the mind of everybody who's watching. I think that it is critical that we understand that we're able to peek into our future, understand that this is what's going to happen in America. I was there. I was on site in Warsaw listening to these people, and this is like being in a college professor's office, listening to all of the college professors talk about all of the political correct things that they believe with respect to tolerance and non-discrimination and all these sorts of things. And the only problem is that it is an organization the United States is a part of that is supposed to be focused on security and cooperation in Europe.
Right, and it's ironic, too. I mean, you mentioned tolerance. They say that their focus is on tolerating everybody's views. But if I'm not mistaken, you and your organization raised some excellent points at this conference that had to do with security and cooperation, and you were quite promptly shut down.
We were shut down on 3 levels, Liz. Not only were we shut down, I'd like to make clear that we were shut down a level above and a level below this conference. So at the conference, we had 13 different interventions. That is 13 different times that the coalition that was led by a great patriot from Austria, Elisabeth Sabatich-Wolf, we were, each time that we spoke, of those 13 times, we were reminded, this is a reminder of the commitments that these countries had made with respect to tolerance and non-discrimination. Lovely. That was really a slap on the wrist each time. But in addition to that, they were talking about hate speech and hate incidents and hate crimes the entire time. That's their real focus. They really are worried about somebody who had a nasty statement said about their hijab. Now, that's wonderful, I suppose, except that during this conference, you actually had a terror strike take place. We're sitting in the room and the London Tube attack took place, not a single mention. But on a 3rd level, they also shut down our speech. That is, in our private conversations, when we were talking to them three times, as I was speaking to the staff of the organization, they would stop me mid-sentence rather than hear the arguments that we wanted to make to them with respect to the concerns we wanted to raise about the flood of migrants who are Sharia compliant coming into their continent.
Right, so essentially their philosophy here is, first of all, willful blindness. They'll sit there and talk about hate crimes while they're ignoring, 31,800 or something like that, attacks waged by radical Islamists in Europe over the past couple years. They'll just exercise willful blindness to those attacks while they're talking about hate speech and then hate crimes, and then they will stifle anybody who dares to disagree with them. I don't understand how this is going to increase the security in Europe or how this is going to increase cooperation between nations. I mean, it's funny in a sense, but in another sense, people are dying. Every week we hear about another one of these attacks. We cannot wrap ourselves in this idea, this liberal utopia that you discussed, that we hear mostly just on college campuses in the United States. If we do, people are going to continue to die. Do they not care about that?
That is really the critical question is, can they really live with all of this blood on their hands? Because the blood is gushing onto their hands every day. There are these attacks over and over and over, and they are desperately clinging to this perspective that they bring to the problem, in spite of all of the proof that they're absolutely wrong. And so those of us who are trying to educate them on the problem that they're actually facing are the ones who are being shut down. And this place is an absolute playground, not just for the politically correct, but for the Sharia compliant. I mean, this was Radical Islam Fest. This was a place where you had side events put on by organizations that are clearly publicly linked with radical Islamist ideologies. And they are the ones who are giving side events. And they have them testifying, talking, giving their perspective and educating everybody with respect to what it is that they should say and what it is that they should believe. Well, let me tell you something, Liz. The reason why the left refuses to acknowledge the link between radical Islam and terrorism is because they can't. Because their entire methodology, the entire belief system is built on every culture being better than America. If this culture is different from America, it's better, right? The problem is that they are actually inviting the enemy in to tell them how they should deal with the enemy. Now, if we had done that under communism, we would have ended up with the president we had the last 8 years.
Right. It's shocking. I mean, sitting here listening to this, they encourage and allow and tolerate, to preempt their own word, they tolerate people who want Sharia to be the law of the land. Yet when someone like you or your organization talks about the threats, talks about what happens, the damage, the death, the destruction that happens under Sharia law, you are stifled. That is the current state of politics in Europe. It's absolutely shocking. Chris